It's setting up.
Okay.
So good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with former State Representative Joe Gibbons, and we're going to have a very nice conversation. Please send us your questions through Facebook or through our chat here so that we can all be in this together. No questions is a bad question. So I just want to thank you for doing this with us. Thank you for sharing your opinions. And please introduce yourself so we can start with the questions.
Well, good morning, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to have this conversation with you. I think this is a conversation that is much needed, especially at this point in time in our history. My name is Joe Gibbons. I was born in New York City, believe it or not, in 1948. 1948 is a very special year in a lot of different people's lives, but I was born in 1948 in New York City. I grew up in Harlem, went to elementary, junior high school in Harlem. Was fortunate to have the opportunity to go away to college in Michigan. I graduated in 1970 and went back to New York City in Harlem and worked as a social worker, a community activist on the block that I grew up on. While I was doing that, I went to school at night. While I was working at Long Island Jewish Hospital in New York City as a methadone counselor, I went to school at night, got a master's degree in public administration, and was hired by IBM as a salesman in New York City. So that's my very early background. I got involved in business. I thought I was going to be involved in the social work area. That was my plan. But I got involved with IBM, got involved in business, became very successful, and didn't leave business or didn't have business as my main focus until I was elected as a Hallandale Beach City Commissioner in 2003. But it was a long road getting there. I was a salesman for IBM. I was moved around the country. I started off in New York City. I was in Michigan. I was in New Jersey. I was in Chicago. All of those were promotions and moves. Then when IBM came out with the PC, I left IBM and became an entrepreneur and opened up 4 computer stores in the state of Michigan, where I was very successful, being the Michigan Minority Supplier of the Year back in 1984, and being the White House, being involved in the White House Conference on Small Business as a small business advocate. That all went very well for me. Later, and I sold that business and became the president of a computer company in Canada for 6 years, which was a really interesting experience because Canada is very different than the United States when it comes both culturally and socially, even though there's 5,524 miles of unprotected border with very different countries in the way that we do a lot of things. But after that, after being in Canada, I always wanted to live in Florida. I came down in 1975 with IBM. At the time I was living in Michigan. But when I had the opportunity after my stint in Canada to move back to the United States, I chose to move to Florida because it's someplace I've really always wanted to live. I love Florida. I'm happy here. I came in 1994 and I feel as if I'm a native Floridian, even though my wife is a native Floridian and she tells me all the time, I'm not, I'm a New Yorker. But that's my background. In 2003, I was elected to the Hallandale Beach City Commissioner, becoming only the second African-American ever elected to the Hallandale Beach City Commission. The first one was 3 years before that. Then in 2006, my state representative term limited out. His name was Ken Gottlieb. He's now a judge in Broward County. And I ran to be the representative for House District 105. No African-American had ever even run in that district. It's a very heavily Jewish district and everybody told me I couldn't win. But believe it or not, I did win. The people supported me and I won. And I served 8 years in Florida House of Representatives. I tell you, it was a great experience. I learned a lot. I think I served well and I did a lot. And I tried to do a lot across the board for all communities. So that's my basic background now. My wife is the president of Palm Beach State College. I left Hallandale Beach a couple of years ago. Now I have a lobbying firm and I get involved in mainly issues only that I care about. I get involved in financial services issues. I get involved in energy issues, which means a lot to everybody. And I get involved in healthcare issues because without your health, what do you have? You have nothing. So those are the areas that I really concentrate on. I lobby both in Broward County and Tallahassee, and I also do some work in Washington, D.C. So that's a quick snapshot of my background. So based on that background, I guess you can imagine that I have lots of ideas and thoughts on hate, racism, etc., based on where I've lived, where I've been, and where I came from. Again, I always tell people I was in college in the 60s. I graduated in 1970. In the 60s, between 66 and 70, I'll tell you, America was a lot like America is now. So that's my background.
Wow. That's a great background. Thank you so much for joining us. And the health one is for another conversation.
Yes, it is.
Because that's really another big one.
Yes.
But today, let me ask you something, because I was very ignorant and also touched on what happened with the race card incident. I know that there was the first African-American race card, and there was an incident with a noose.
Right.
And I couldn't find what a noose was.
Okay, it's interesting, and he was not the first one, but he was not the first driver, but he's very popular right now and very successful right now. What a noose is, it is a rope that is tied in the form of a hangman's knot that was used back in, well, the hangman's knot, we've actually had some hangings this year in the United States. But
I heard, yeah, that was.
So, but the noose is a symbol of that. It is meant to intimidate, to terrorize people, reminding them that who they are and the fact that they can always be hung because we still have the rope.
So it's, for example, for the Jewish people, something like the swastika.
Similar, but a little different. The swastika has a deeper meaning because it encompasses more things. The noose is a simple act of just one thing, hanging, whereas the swastika represents a total hate of a race and someone who wanted to destroy that race. Whereas a noose is just an intimidation thing, because back in the old days, if slaves tried to escape, they got them and they hung them. If slaves were accused of doing any kind of crime, guilty or innocent, they hung them. Typically, a lot of people were lynched with the noose, without a trial, without a courtroom or trial. They would just, if they were accused of a crime, a group of people would get together, like the Ku Klux Klan and other groups, and simply hang them. And they hung them with the noose. So that's where the noose comes from.
That's really disturbing. And that's what we've been touched with for the past, I don't know, for the past year, because I've heard from the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, that the numbers in hate crimes and hate incidents, because they do divide incidents versus crimes, and both have been increasingly going up in numbers that they have never seen for the past year.
You know what? Every year in America, there are about an estimated 200,000 people that are victimized by hate crimes. 200,000 people in this day and time that are victimized by hate crimes. And you may ask yourself, where does that come from? Where does that come from? We talk about hate crimes, but we also talk about hate speech. Most people don't know it, but hate speech is actually not a crime to be prosecuted unless it's involved in a criminal act. But when we talk about hate, it goes very deep into things that are wrong with our country today, and not just our country, the entire world.
No, I totally understand that it is the entire world. But in your opinion, there has always been racism. There has always been incidents with race. I was a victim in Colombia many, many times because I was Jewish. I remember one time when I was working actually in a political campaign with one of the candidates for president. And we were in a meeting, and a nice guy who I thought he was nice. We met every day for 2 weeks. And one day he decided to ask my last name. And when I said Mizrahi, he said, "Oh, you're Jewish." And I answered, "Yes, I am." And his response was, "Oh, so Hitler didn't do his job if you're here."
Wow. Now that's direct.
That was straight at. I couldn't even, I was so shocked that I couldn't even respond. And I remember people were so disturbed. They took me out through the back door just in case things escalated. I remember contacting the Israeli embassy immediately, and he was on a watch list.
Hmm.
They were after him for many years. They didn't know who he was. So that part, I wasn't able to go back, but that stuck in my mind because we had been in meetings talking about everything. He was there, many people were there, and the hate that came out of his mouth when he knew I was Jewish, I will never forget.
But you never knew he harbored that hate inside. You had no
I
idea.
never. It was only until he found out that I was Jewish, he let it out. So I couldn't understand why one person can turn just because of a religion, of a background, of the color of their skin. And that's the part that's still puzzling me.
It's not puzzling to me, and he's not alone. And in fact, I would be surprised if he was that bold to come at you that directly, that he was not part of a hate group, or the people he hung around or the people that he associated with, they probably felt the same way. The interesting thing is he had to ask you your last name. He couldn't tell because of your nothing physical about you. Whereas if it were me, he would have known right away. Okay, so
Right.
he'd have known right
And
away.
I look more Latin than Jewish, and people don't understand that you can also be Latin as well as Jewish.
Absolutely, absolutely. But he thought you were probably 100% Latin. All right, and it was in a Latin American country, so he was probably comfortable with that. But when he found out you were Jewish, you were all of a sudden a different person than the person he had been interacting with the whole time for the 2 weeks, because he had in his heart and in his mind a hatred for Jewish people. And to say that Hitler did not do his job is just one of the most unbelievable, bold statements that someone would say directly to you in your face. That means that he has no shame, that he really felt in his heart that he was right, and he would not have been himself had he not told you that.
No, so that is why you said something before when we were talking private, that when we are born, we don't have a single hate cell in our blood. We're taught that. And I get it. I understand it comes from education.
Right. Hate is not in our DNA.
No, it is not in our DNA. It is taught by our parents and everybody else. But that is the important thing, that we need education in this country. We need a better system. I was shocked that they had to go through a vote just to include racism in schools in Florida.
Yes. In
So
fact,
why is that? It should come natural.
because Florida is, believe it or not, is still in the South, and we did have a civil war, and the South had beliefs they did not want to end slavery. So and a lot of places in Florida right now, some counties in Florida, you would be shocked at the things I hear. My wife is from Milton, Florida, which is up near Pensacola in Santa Rosa County. When I first met her and went up there, they were flying rebel flags everywhere. I remember the first time I went into a Stuckey's gas station with her up there. There were rebel flags, there were rebel emblems on mugs, there were rebel things everywhere. And I said to them, "Hey guys, the war is over and we won." Well, my wife quickly ushered me out of there because I'm from New York City and I'm not used to just having that kind of thing flagrantly in this country put in my face, just like you were not used to having that flagrantly said to you in your face. My response, as opposed to yours, was I had to respond and say something to them to let them know that they were actually backwards. You're celebrating something that was against the country that you live in right now. And you're trying to keep that going, that feeling, that history going. And believe it or not, it actually hurts, intimidates, and scares some people to see that amount of flagrant racism. And that's why even today, Mississippi just yesterday or the day before voted to take the rebel flag off of their state flag. Can you imagine all these years later, the state has to
did they ask before to be taken down, or was this spearheaded by everything that happened in the past month?
No, this has been going on for years. They could never get the votes in the legislature in Mississippi to do it. This is the first time, spurred on by what's going on now. That's the only reason it happened. And the governor of Mississippi said he wasn't going to sign the legislation unless, but then it passed overwhelmingly, and he relented and signed the legislation because he did not want to change the flag, no matter what that meant to anyone of any race. Certain people just don't care. They say, look, at your first Black president. Isn't that enough? What else do you want?
Okay, talking about that, I really thought that when Obama was elected, that people will respect or racism was going to end, not to end because I'm very naive in that sense, very wishful thinking, I'm gonna say. But in that sense, I really thought that they were going to respect more when we had the first Black African-American president elected. And it didn't happen that way. On the contrary, it completely went the opposite way.
Exactly. And I'll tell you, the president we have now is a reaction to the fact that we had the first Black president. But let me tell you, I was in the Electoral College in 2008 for President Barack Obama, and in the Electoral College in 2012, having been selected by the Democratic Party. And it really meant a lot. It meant that a lot of progress had occurred, but it didn't erase 200-300 years of segregation and racism, because it's not one act that can do it. It's built into our custom. It's built into our institutions. It's institutional racism that when I have conversations with people, sometimes they never thought about it like that. And what's happening now, because of what has happened and the sensitivity that people in the country have, you now have people actually taking a look and reading different books about it. And I was on a call. I was in Leadership Florida last year, and there's a gentleman who is one of the provosts at Florida Atlantic University, and he was really a cool guy and everything in the class. And we had a Leadership Florida Zoom meeting 2 nights ago, and he was saying that he right now had read a couple of books and he thought he was really non-racist, had no racial bones in his body, but now he's like shocked and really working at it because he was shocked at what he did not know about racism. He just did not know. And so there are a lot of subtle things that happen that are a part of our culture that are racist, but unless people look at it, they study it, they won't know it. But people of in the race who are the ones that are taking the brunt of it, or who feel it through not getting a job, through not getting selected for something, they know it. They know it. But one of the good things about what's happening now is that people are really sensitive to it, and people really are taking a hard look and are going to have hard conversations like the one that you and I are having now. That's not difficult at all for us, but for many people, it's very difficult to have this kind of conversation. But it's a conversation that needs to be had if, in fact, we're going to deal with a problem that we have in our country.
How can we create something regarding educating the people? For example, where am I going? There was, and I don't remember at this point, a teacher in Midwest United States. Mm-hmm. She was teaching against the curriculum of her school about the Holocaust, right, which is still being denied by many people, that it didn't exist. And the way she wanted to teach it was, remember the paper clips? Yes. Do you remember that story? That no. The way she taught it was that the kids needed to collect 6 million paper clips.
Whoa.
So that they could understand the magnitude of how many people were killed because of race, because of hate.
Right.
So what happened was that kids started collecting paper clips and it started adding up. They had to go and rent a warehouse to put all the 6 million paper clips, because if you take in your hand, it's just nothing. But when it added up, they saw the magnitude of what it was all about. And what happened next, the kids and their families started studying about the Holocaust. And they all collected money. They brought one of the actual trains from Germany and did a whole memorial and put all the 6 million paper clips inside the train. And that's what spearhead that they had to put it in the curriculum, because nobody knew of what was the magnitude of what happened. So if we can get something out of our conversation today, I would love to create something that impacted that for our kids.
Right. You know, and that's a big problem because like the whole burning of the town in Tulsa, Oklahoma years ago, where you had a vibrant African-American Black community of business people and everything that were in the town. That whole town was burned down and more than 300 people were murdered because people didn't like the fact that you had educated Black people who were business people in the town. A lot that just came out when Juneteenth was a couple of weeks ago. A lot of people had never heard of Juneteenth. A lot of people had no idea what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So what we find is that things are not taught in history. You know, our history lessons are pretty much sanitized because they don't want young people to know. But
so can we unsanitize it so that we can all learn? Because I was now looking, I got a video that I don't know if I want to share it. I don't know if I really want to share it because it's a little disturbing, about a Black community in New York attacking the Jewish people.
Mhm.
And when they were asking, why are you attacking them? And their response was, because they own the houses, they have the works, and we have nothing.
Mhm.
And that wasn't a real response for attacking.
no.
That isn't. And the violence is not a way to respond.
And that's the problem. See, and that's where I hope the country is now. The country has to know that violence and hatred does not accomplish or change anything.
No.
You know, so they said, well, because you own the houses that we live in, et cetera, et cetera. By you attacking them, they're still going to own the houses that you live in. So you didn't change anything. So they took the opposite approach of what they should have taken. If you have a discussion about home ownership and learning how to do business, you know, it's a matter of learning rather than criticizing, exposing yourself. Right? They have patience is a bad word, because when we talk to a group of Black people, the last thing they want to hear about is patience, because you know we've been patient. Slavery ended when? In 1865, and it's still today we don't still have in a lot of places equal rights. And again, as I said earlier, there's institutional racism built in, and it's been all that many years. You know, we had the 1964 Civil Rights Act. How long ago was 1964? You know, and I was in college in 1968 when Martin Luther King was killed and Bobby Kennedy was killed. You know, that kind of stuff. How long ago was that? So if you say be patient until when?
Oh no, I'm not saying be patient. It's not patient. It's get educated.
Exactly, and that's what we have to do. We have to have an actual plan. A lot of people like to have discussions, but when I get involved in those discussions with different groups, okay, so now that we know, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? Are we going to get involved and make sure that we talk to our school board about what is really being taught in history? So it's got to start somewhere. So it's great to talk about it, but you have to have an action plan. You have to have, say, okay, now we know, what are we going to do about it? Because if we don't, nothing's going to change, and we'll be patient and still be talking about it. But we have to now put action plans. And I'll tell you, as elected officials and as leaders, we have to be the ones, and I'm an ex-elected official, but we have to be the ones who spearhead those kinds of conversations, because that's a part of being a leader. Leaders lead.
And that's the reason that I wanted to have this conversation, to see what we can do to educate the people. For example, I'm going to touch on something that has really puzzled me. With everything that happened, with all the protests and everything, there has been vandalism on the statues of Christopher Columbus in many places. Mm-hmm. Some of the people are saying that they have been, some of the people have said that he was killing the Indians, and that was the reason that they were attacking them. But the truth was, and there may be other truth, and this is many, many, many years ago, that in 1492, Christopher Columbus asked Queen Elizabeth in Spain to give him the funds to go and prove that the world was round.
Flat, right?
Not flat.
Right.
Because everybody thought that he was going to sail, drop, and disappear. So he wanted to prove that the world was flat. But there were two things. He was Jewish, and he was hiding his identity because Queen Elizabeth and King Ferdinand were the ones that ordered the Inquisition. And if you remember the Inquisition, they were killing everybody that was not Catholic.
Correct.
So the Jews had two choices, either convert to Catholicism or they would die being burnt, because that's how they killed them.
Right.
And a lot of the people converted to save their lives. You have many, many stories of underground services and everything.
Like the Underground Railroad.
No, yeah, like the Underground Railroad, but they were still practicing Judaism, hiding from everyone. And Christopher Columbus' family was one of them. The other ones that converted were the ones that are known now as marranos, or pigs. And that's where all the Latin names come from, like Gonzalez, Perez. There were a lot of the very Latin names because they had to change their name, go to church. And those people, and many of them continue to be Catholic. So when Christopher Columbus discovered America, what they really were learning was the culture. They hadn't seen Indians. It was a shock to them. There's white Spanish people, and they were trying to learn the culture. They were trying to learn, they had different foods, they had different everything. What really killed the Indians, and it's very ironic, we're talking about this today, was all the viruses that they brought with them.
Exactly.
It was the cholera, the flu that was called influenza. It was the common cold that the Indians did not have the antibodies, were not used to that. They did not have any way of treating them, and they all died.
Yeah. I have a question for you though. Do you think the people who attack those statues know that history?
That's my problem. They don't.
Exactly.
And that is where I'm going to. That is why I wanted to touch on this, because they do not know that history. And when I posted it, I did post the history. Somebody responded to me and said, yes, they killed all the Indians. No, it wasn't like that. So this is why we need to come up with a plan. We need to do a very good educational program. That is also the other reason. and I'm really going to touch on this, that I created the Power of the Heels, which is a foundation that dedicates to mentoring women, young girls, that now we did create Power of the Heels for men.
Okay.
Because it's educating a whole generation of a new educated generation that can be independent, self-sufficient, and can be knowledgeable. And it's all based on what schools are not teaching them.
But on the other side, which is laudable and I think wonderful, but conversely, we need to interact with our schools and try to change that curriculum, because you should not have to do that. Of course, now you have to do that because it's not happening.
Because there wasn't any, I come from a country where I had to study history. I had to study geography. I knew the capitals. I knew because, of course, with time, and I wish I wouldn't forget, but I knew the capitals of 90% of the world. And now you ask somebody on the street, where is Colombia? And they think it's Africa.
Right. They don't know. It's not taught.
And every African American comes from Africa.
Not true.
Correct, not true. And originally, the people that lived in this country were the Indians that were also segregated to keeping them on the side. And those were the actual original Americans, because we all come from somewhere.
Exactly. Those are real Native Americans. Everyone else is an immigrant. That's why the thing that really disturbs me is you have immigrants who, now that they have blended into the American society, they don't like immigrants. They don't like it. They want to close the door. Now that we're here, let's close the door behind us and let's not let anybody else in that's exactly not us. Let's not let them into this country. And it's not about that. It is not about closing doors or building walls. That's not what this country, everybody is an immigrant. We had different waves of immigrants. We had the Irish come, you had the Italians come. And it's real to me because I grew up in New York City, and they formed different neighborhoods. Harlem was not originally a Black neighborhood. Harlem was not a Black neighborhood. Blacks migrated to Harlem and people moved to other neighborhoods. But people, when they came in, they moved into neighborhoods with people who were just like them. You have Little Italy in New York City. You have New York City is broken into different boroughs, and each borough you have segments. It is natural, but it's not natural to stay like that if, in fact, you want to live in a country where you have all immigrants who, in fact, are trying to take advantage of what this country was created to do, and that is to provide opportunities for everybody to live freely and to grow and raise families and have a free society where we all have come from somewhere else. We still welcome people in from other countries, but we blend together. And the only way we blend together is if we're exposed to one another. That's why I say an opportunity is not an opportunity unless you've had exposure to see it as such. You can miss many opportunities because you weren't exposed to what that opportunity was all about. So opportunities will walk by you and you'll never know that it was an opportunity because you never learned what those opportunities were. So that's why I think, and what I advocate for is, let's have as much exposure for our children. Expose them to as many things as possible. We have different types of museums. We have different types of vaults. We have arts, culture, businesses. I think that we need to expose our children to other races, to people who are not like us, to people so that we, in fact, learn that they're people just like us. We're all human beings. What we have developed into our people who have been taught certain cultures in a certain way. But because we're different, it does not make us bad. And that's where I think we need to go. Because someone is different than you, in spite of what you've heard about them, until you get to know them, you can't hate them. No matter how the hate from your brain gets into your heart, that's not the way you're going to live in a free society.
I think that there is one word that sums it up, and it's respect. It doesn't matter what you believe in or what I believe in. but it's all about respecting each other.
We're all human beings, and we have a right to our own thoughts. That's the one really good thing about our country is it's a free society, and you're free to think, you're free to learn, you're free to grow, and you're free to chase your dreams. And that's what it's really all about, is taking advantage of the freedom that's given to us. But freedom is great, but it has to be equal. Freedom is only great when it is equal to when everybody has the same opportunity to take advantage of the system that we live in. Because again, we need exposure, we need opportunities. Otherwise, we're going to stay stuck and be told to be patient for years and years, and nothing will change. So it's up to us who have been exposed to try to make sure that we engage like you're doing now and expose other people to have these kinds of this is not a hard conversations. The real hard conversations come when, in fact, you have to talk about to your children that tell them that you're white, and that being white, you're going to have certain advantages that some people are not going to have, just by the nature of the way this society is built. Those kind of people, first of all, people have to acknowledge the fact that there's a thing called white privilege. You say that to people, and automatically, no, I got everything I did. I worked hard. I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. Yes, you did, but you had help. And so what I'm saying is that what we have to do is not be defensive when we have to acknowledge things about ourselves that are there that we've never really talked about. Like now people are reading books about racism and things that happen in this country, and they're like shocked. They're absolutely surprised at things that they had inside of them that are actually discriminatory or biased or bigoted that they never even recognized. They never even recognize it. So people say things sometimes that are biased, that are bigoted. They don't recognize it. They're not saying it of a bad heart.
Because they're not taught.
They don't recognize it. And so that's why I'm really glad the country is where it is now. I'm really glad we're at the level that we're at now, because it's going to force things to happen. Before, everything was, well, these bad things happen and then they go away. I call it the 10-day rule. Something really bad happens, but 10 days from now, nobody's talking about it anymore. Well, this is forcing.
Look what happened, yeah, when you talk about that you had help, look at the part of discrimination with women's jobs.
Absolutely.
A man does the same job as a woman, but the woman gets paid 80 cents on the dollar.
Today, that's right now.
Today, because before it was 30 cents to the dollar. Right. At least it's growing, but it's still not equal.
Same thing with minorities. They don't get paid the same rate of pay. Absolutely not. I mean, and there's empirical evidence that documents all of this. It's documented. It's a fact. People know it, but what do they do about it? What's happening? Who's trying to force equal pay for women? And why do they have to force it?
Why? Yeah, why do they have to force it? Why do they have to choose the color of the skin based on knowledge?
Right.
It's whoever does the best job, and it doesn't matter where they come from or what the color of their skin or what religion they believe in.
Right.
It's based on knowledge and the capabilities that they have.
And that's what we talk about President Barack Obama. He was the best man for the job at that time, but that's only a small clip in time that where America was willing to vote for the best man for that job at that time. And I'm saying that's the way it should be all the time.
And he was also criticized. I read something when he was elected that he had a very tough time because for the white people, he was black. And for the black people, he was not black enough. He talked different. Right. And meaning talk different was only one ingredient because he was educated.
Right.
So he learned to talk
that way.
I remember it was more than 15 years ago. I worked with the book fair, and he came out with his first book. He was an elected official. He came out with his first book. And I remember that the line to see him was huge. And I couldn't stay for the whole thing. But when he started talking, I bought the book and took it to my son and said, he will be the first Black American president. And my son responded, this country will never, ever get elected. They will never let him become president. And I was glad that through time, because the way he expressed, the way he was thinking, it was, the education was there. And I think that is the key word. So for the Black people, he talked like white.
Not for all the Black people, not for all the Black people, for people like me. No, I love the way he spoke. He didn't speak like a white person. He spoke like an educated person.
Correct.
Well read.
That is why we all need to educate our own people. Because look what happened again when Bloomberg ran for president and he was Jewish,
right.
Everybody was afraid that it would create more anti-Semitism.
Right.
And that is true.
And you know what? And you're segueing perfectly into what's happened since he was not president. It's gone in the other direction.
In the other direction,
right.
Correct.
It's gone in the other direction as a response to the fact that he was elected president. And the bad thing was, when he was elected president, you had people like Mitch McConnell, who's a Senate head right now, said, our only goal is to get him unelected and to not pass any legislation, let any of his legislation be successful. It was to make him an unsuccessful president.
And that is the part that I don't understand, because when you are in politics, the whole thing is checks and balances and trying to convince the other side of something that's good. Like, I don't want to get into politics because I know we can go forever and ever discussing the whole thing. But without getting into anything, I have a question for you. And I don't want to get into the whole health system. I just have a question that I really do not understand. And it's a learning question. Why are they trying to eliminate Obamacare when there is nothing, I know that it's not perfect. I know that it's not the perfect solution, but there's 30 million people that have benefited from that insurance. So what, there isn't other alternative. So what I understand is you eliminate something, but you put something better on it. Like you have to how do you say it in English? I'm thinking in Spanish. You have to destroy something in order to build something better. But in this case, they're destroying it without even a plan to build anything better. So what's going to happen with all those people that will be left without insurance, especially in a time like this?
Not to be political, but that's a question you answer at the polls. But now I was in the Florida legislature. In Florida, we did not do Medicaid expansion. Medicaid expansion would have brought to Florida $5 billion a year of health care for people in Medicaid. As a legislature, I was in the legislature, and we fought tooth and nail because that's a part of the Affordable Care Act, is Medicaid expansion. The state of Florida did not take the Medicaid expansion money and did not have an alternative for how to insure those people. So we had a large number of people that were uninsured who had to use our emergency rooms as a primary care physician, which is the most expensive kind of healthcare you can ever have, because number one, when you go there, your injury is acute. When you are reactive rather than proactive, proactive costs a lot less than being reactive because you're not as sick as you would not have gotten as sick had you been able to be proactively treated. So why, you can stop right in the state of Florida. Why have we not expanded Medicaid even this year? To today, Florida has not taken the Medicaid expansion, which is part of the Affordable Care Act. And every year, when I was in the legislature, since it passed, we fought like the devil to have the state of Florida accept Medicaid expansion, which, oh, by the way, it's our federal money. It's $5 billion a year. It's actually our money to take care of our people. And we said no and had no alternative for it. So when we asked the overall question, we can start locally here. in the state of Florida. We are an example. We answer that question for you because we didn't even take advantage of it ourselves in the state of Florida. Now you're asking nationally? We can't even get our state to do it. Now you want to get the whole country to do it. And it's, the problem with it is Obama care, which we used to say, yeah, Obama does care. But, they will not, they're trying to get rid of it.
Was named something different, maybe it would have made a difference.
How about the Affordable Care Act?
Affordable Care Act, correct.
Which in essence, it is. It's affordable care for people who can't afford insurance or to be able to have insurance to go beforehand, to go to your primary care physician rather than to emergency room. It would have driven down our costs overall tremendously. Our healthcare costs, which, oh, by the way, if you look at the state of Florida's budget, healthcare is a third, education is a third, and everything else is the rest. But 2/3 of our budget is healthcare and education. The two key things that you and I spoke about earlier that everybody needs if, in fact, we're going to be a strong county, state, city, or country.
But wait, when we go back a little bit on education, I'm really worried about what's going to happen next year, because that's even going to create a bigger gap.
Exactly.
A bigger gap because the people that can afford internet, that can afford good computers for their kids, or can afford a tutor to replace the extra classes that they have on Zoom, are going to get ahead. Well, what happens with those people that literally cannot afford it?
Right. I'll tell you now.
I know that in Aventura, we increased the budget for the teachers so that they could get a higher band of internet so that they would be able to teach better without worrying that the Zoom was gonna go out.
Right.
So what's gonna happen now when families that can't even afford food, that they're doing the lines on food, much less buy a computer or pay for more internet?
Yeah, positively, I can say, now I'm in Palm Beach County, but this summer, Palm Beach County, for kids that didn't have a computer, they were making sure that every child had a computer or had a way to access the internet, because how can they do distance learning when they don't have a computer?
But
So,
I hear that still kids do not have the internet they need.
of course,
They do have internet, but if you take a family of 4, they're all working from home.
Yep.
They're all connected to the internet, and we're not talking an hour or 2, we're talking 24/7 now.
yes. The answer is funding. The answer is funding. It all, in the end, it all boils down to funding. If we have to fund what we believe, and if we believe that everybody should have equal access to a good education, that has to be a funding priority. We can make it happen, but it has to be our priority. And not to get political, that's why you have to vote for people who think like that and who are committed to that like that. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. You need a commitment to education. You need a commitment to healthcare. Unless people are committed to it, they're not going to fight for funding for people who don't think it's important, who don't really care if everybody has equal access to both education and healthcare. So it really is up to us. That's one of the good things about this country when we don't have voter suppression, when everybody can vote, because then the will of the people will speak. And I'll guarantee you, the will of the people overall will be that we fund things like education and that we fund things like healthcare. I believe in this country, and I believe in fact that is really, really what the majority of people believe. And if I were a candidate, those are the kind of things I would be talking about, because I truly believe that people will support the idea of properly funding education and properly funding healthcare. Because if we don't, the society is going to be split apart, and we're never going to be the dream that everybody's the dream of America.
Look at Finland. Look at the story of Finland. Finland decided to put all their funding on education, and the best paid profession was the teachers. Mm-hmm. So they shifted everything to paying teachers the best paid ever. They put all the resources on the priority of education, and look where they are now. They're one of the top countries. They do have a 4-day week and a 3-day weekend. And that's how they went up to be one of the best quality of life, because they did move and shift all their priorities to education. And this is what we need to do now.
Right. Now, not to be political, but one of Governor DeSantis's priorities this year was starting teacher pay, $47,500. I was worried because our revenue is short. The budget takes place today. And we had a huge deficit that had to be erased. I was afraid that because they had the money in the budget to increase teacher salaries to a starting pay of $47,500. I knew that we had money in for affordable housing, the Sadowski funds. It was like $500 million there. And then so there were big numbers like that. And I was afraid that since we were running short on revenue, that he was going to cut teacher pay. But I have to applaud him. He did let the teacher pay stay in the budget, which again is, when we talk about priorities, that's a priority. You want good people going into teaching.
Good people to teach.
Right.
That's the foundation of what this country is going to be about.
That's a move in a right direction. That's a good starting place. And that's what those priorities need to stay there, because you don't want people to have a disincentive to go into teaching. We want the best people teaching our children. Not just people who just want a job. We want people who are really interested in making sure that our children learn.
So with that, I want to thank you. I want to hold us accountable to create a program to teach people about racism. And yes, I know I had to do it on my own. It was on the way to be created when the virus hit. But racism, respect, and ethics will be on our priority for the Power of the Hills. But if we can do it for Florida, that would be great. I know that is part in Aventura of what we want. Our education is the top education we can find, and that's what we will continue to do.
Well, I represented Aventura in the legislature, and it was an honor representing that city because you guys were really doing some very progressive, aggressive things to make Aventura one of the best cities in the state of Florida. So I commend you on the things that you're doing. I'm available to you, as you know, when you want to have these kinds of conversations, because that's the way we're all going to grow. That's the way we're all going to learn. And thank you for inviting me to participate.
No, thank you again. Please share this so that everybody knows everything that we talked about, which I think it's really important.
Thank you.
And next week, I didn't want to ask you this question because next week, I'm having Representative Dodie Joseph as my guest, and our conversation is, how do we move forward?
Good. I know her. She's a very good representative. I really like the work that she's doing in Tallahassee. As you know, I go to Tallahassee, and she's been very active and really pushing good legislation.
Yes. So it's how do we move forward? Please join us next Wednesday at 11 a.m. So thank you.
Thank you.